Back to Heard Tell. Okay, we're going to talk some Congress. We always go to this guy, Eric Garcia. He is the congressional reporter for the Independent. Also got a great book out. We'll talk about that in a little bit. How are you, sir? Great to talk to you again.
Doing all right. How you doing?
I'm good. I'm a little worried about you and your job security because we did the State of the Union, but something that's not really getting reported much on, except I hear it from all the people that cover Congress. This Congress is doing nothing, and I thought that was a little bit of hyperbole, and then I went and looked at the Senate schedule. They're averaging one vote a day since they convened. One, and it's usually a procedure. There's literally nothing going on in Congress right now. This is amazing.
There is the Senate is literally, I was talking with a friend of mine. It's like basically at the end of the year last year, they passed the omnibus, and then after they're like, okay, we did what we needed to do. Because like if you remember, after Warnock won the runoff, Schumer said, we're just going to focus on judges. Like he was taking a page out of Mitch McConnell's book. But there just have mostly, as you said, been procedural votes. There was like a vote to confirm an assistant secretary or something, but there, and I think there was one for a judge. But it's not like, you know, the much to the chagrin of Democrats, the judicial confirmation assembly line hasn't been initiated, and conversely, there hasn't been a lot of movement on really anything else. And then meanwhile, on the House side, and we can talk about the House later, Kevin has basically had to do a bunch of performative votes, I think it's fair to call them, to appease the gremlins in his conference. So yeah, they just haven't gotten anything done.
What? Look, I'm all for gridlock because you can't screw anything up if you're not doing anything at all. But this is really remarkable stuff. Now, we knew some of this was going to happen because it's such a thin majority. You know,
Yes.
Even though the Democrats have the Senate, they have a slim majority also. So we knew some of this was baked into the cake. But this is really amazing for the start of a presidential election cycle. And let's all be honest, all the House members start running right around December. So they've got about, 8-9 months until they start running again. There's no sense of urgency. I know how much. Give me the ratio, though. How much of this is the gridlock of the situation? How much of it is leadership not knowing how to handle it and move the minutia of the Senate and the House?
So I would say it's about a hybrid. I would say it's about 60-40. Part of it is, as you said, it's that they have, because on the Senate side, there's a 51-49 split. So there's that. Not counting the fact that Kirsten Sinema basically became an independent. She still caucuses with the Democrats, but she's friendly with a lot of Republicans and votes for them sometimes. On the House side, the Republicans have a 10-seat majority that's going to become a 9-seat majority after a special election in Virginia. So part of it is just handling these very, very slim majorities. The other part of it is that they just did it is that on the Senate side, they hadn't sorted out their committees until like not this last week, but the week before. Because what happened is Eric Schmidt, the new senator from Missouri, wanted to be on Judiciary with Greitens, and then they didn't give it to him. So he wound up going on Veterans Armed Services, and then Hawley went off Armed Services. So they've just been playing musical chairs because Republicans have one less seat. And then on the House side, they had trouble with sorting through committees because McCarthy, let's be honest, he wanted revenge after they kicked off Marjorie Taylor Greene and Paul Gosar. So there was a lot of back and forth on committee sortings on that one. And on top of that, they had to organize these new committees on China, COVID, and the weaponization committee.
Yeah. Let's talk about that committee real quick. Eric Garcia joining us. There's been a lot of hubbub about it. Jim Jordan's heading it.
Yes.
What are they actually doing? Because everybody's got their opinions of it. You know, the Republicans are saying this is the hold accountable stuff. The Democrats are saying this is going to be a perpetual Benghazi hearing. What's the truth of it? What are they actually doing in the committees? And more to the point, how's Jim Jordan look, Jim Jordan's wanted this power for a long time. He's angled for it. Now he's got it.
Yes.
What's he actually doing with it?
So this is the thing that I've said about Jim Jordan. The reason why he didn't want to be Speaker of the House is that being the guy in the chair is very different from being a bomb thrower, which is what he's been through the majority of his career. John Boehner used to call him a legislative terrorist. But now I think what he's trying to do is he's trying to split the balance between seeming like a responsible chairman of a committee while still being the guy who hoots and hollers about James Comey and Peter Strzok and Lisa Page. So I was actually in the room for the first 2 hours, I think, of that weaponization committee before my mom called, and you got to answer to mom no matter where she calls you. And so what basically they did is that they had this opening panel with Chuck Grassley, Ron Johnson, Jamie Raskin, and Tulsi Gabbard of all people. And basically Johnson and Grassley complained that the federal government was interfering with their FBI, with their investigation into the Biden family, and Tulsi Gabbard just went on to a whole tirade about how how people were mean to her about and said that she was a Russian agent. It really just kind of, and a lot of it was, moaning and a lot of other things about the Twitter files and Elon Musk. So really the question, and I said this, my takeaway from it was the difficulty, I think, for a lot of Republicans on that committee is making the things that they care about seem like it's stuff that other people should care about. And that's really been the difficult thing. It has, but so far it hasn't necessarily, and given it's just the first week, so it hasn't produced the fruit, and it hasn't led to, the kind of wall-to-wall marquee headlines that I think Jim Jordan and Kevin McCarthy wanted it to have.
Yeah, I'm part of that, Eric Garcia. This is not the January 6th committee. This is a fully staffed committee with both sides. The names on the Democratic side, for people that don't know, other than Debbie Wasserman Schultz, who headed up the DNC, so she has a little bit, probably more of a national profile. Guys like Jerry Conley, Sylvia Grace, Linda Sanchez, these aren't big-time names. These are people that know how to do committees, though. There's pushback on this thing. There is a back. By the way, Jordan's actually doing a pretty good job with fair time as far as the committee members go. Obviously, the witnesses are going to slant, but he's playing it straight with the committee members. He's doing his job in that regard. But that also means they're getting pretty close to equal time on this thing. I'm just looking at it from the outside, so I'm like, yeah, I know Macy and Gates and Stefanik's on these committees. Is there any way an outside observer is not just going to look at this and see it as a wash?
Yeah, that's the other thing is so Jerry Connolly and Dan Goldman had, I think, some of the best questioning on the Democratic side. I think that Stacey Plaskett, who's the ranking Democrat, had pretty much had some good questioning and had a pretty strong opening statement. So the fact that so as you said, again, because this is a very narrow, because Republicans have a very narrow majority, it's not like they have a bunch of committee members who can just overwhelm the Democrats. That leads, like you said, to it kind of just people seeing this as basically a break even. And Goldman had a pretty interesting exchange with Jordan. I'm sure, it made the rounds on the internet. And for those who don't know, Dan Goldman was the head attorney during the first impeachment for Trump with the Ukraine stuff. So as you said, it was at the end of the day, I kind of walked away from it feeling like this didn't move the needle either one way or the other.
Yeah, I agree with that. And the other problem you got is, and I've asked people this question, I still haven't got a good answer, is like, Jim Jordan's the guy who's like, I'm not going to answer any subpoenas. Why is anybody getting subpoenaed this thing? Their first opening statement going to be, well, you didn't answer your subpoena. Why do I got to answer my subpoena? And I think that's going to kind of be the doom loop that this thing's going to get into, other than just the sound bites and the partisanship that's going to come out of it, of what they're going to. I don't think anybody outside of that's really going to get any traction on this. Is that a fair way to look at it?
It is a fair way to look at it. Again, because of the fact that he didn't answer subpoenas on the January 6th committee, he didn't, and he's basically kind of thumbed his nose at it. That has kind of led to him. That could actually kind of backfire on him. Incidentally enough, the funny thing about that oversight committee, about that weaponization committee, is yes, you got your Gates and your Stefanik's and all that. It was not as much of a circus as the oversight committee hearing the day before, which was a debacle. And I think that Kevin is probably regretting and I should say, James Comer is a pretty, evenly, fair-handed guy, and Jamie Raskin, from what I understand, likes him, and when I've talked to them, they get along. But I think that Kevin is regretting putting Marjorie Taylor Greene on that committee.
Yeah.
So that hearing was much more of a debacle. So.
Yeah, I wanted to ask you about Marjorie Taylor Greene too, because I've got a little bit of a working theory on here. I think, and people, look, this is just, we do a dog grown folk talk here. Probably the best thing that ever happened to Marjorie Taylor Greene was the Democrats stripping her of her committees, because nobody listened to her talk outside of conservative media for 2 years.
Yes.
Anybody that pays a lick of attention to her, they can't hide her now. And I know she's not the only crazy person in Congress. There's a couple on the Democratic side that say really Looney Tunes things, but she's just kind of, look, Kevin made the deal. Kevin McCarthy, she buddied up to Kevin to get her committee assignments back. She's got it. They can't hide her now, and she ought to be an in-kind donation to Democrats, because she is just so off the wall with this stuff. I think this, in the long run, is actually going to end up being her undoing the fact that she's actually on the committees now.
No question, because I remember, like, after she got stripped of committee, she says, "Oh, well, now I have more time to, like, do other things," back in, like, 2021. And weirdly enough, she was kind of right about that, because if you're on committees, that means you actually kind of have to do serious, important work. Say what you will about Matt Gaetz, but if you remember, the thing that he wanted when he twisted the knife into McCarthy was he wanted a chairmanship over I think it was for a subcommittee on armed services, which makes sense. He represents Pensacola. He represents the Panhandle. There's military bases there. Greene, doesn't have those same interests. It's not like she necessarily wants to, get something through across the finish line on education or government reform or things like that. She's just going to be, I think, fair to say, peacocking on these committees, and then these things are going to go viral. These things are going to go. These things are going to make the round on the internet. And incidentally enough, ironically enough, the person she's now on the committee, that she's on, oversight. She's now going toe to toe with AOC, which, criticisms of her aside, and there are plenty of criticisms I've made criticisms of her. She's a good questioner in these hearings, and she doesn't peacock. So it probably might be their undoing. And as I said, Kevin might come to regret putting her on oversight, because she's going to be asking about the Twitter files and Elon Musk and, COVID origins. And she's also on the COVID origins committee as well. So that's going to be another thing.
Yeah, Eric Garcia joins us. Okay, we've been beating up on the Republicans. Let's talk Democrats for a second.
Sure.
Chuck Schumer hadn't had a whole lot to do because they're waiting on the House to do anything. He does have two themes developing here. He's talking a lot about the debt limit, which all he's got to do is sit still, because they're going to pass a debt limit. Kevin painted himself on a quarter in there. So he's just waiting on that shoe to drop so he can hammer them. He is definitely just going to talk about China nonstop. This is all he's talking about now is China, China, China. He's got some simpatico with Mitch and the Republicans on this, so he can call it as a bipartisan issue. This is something that obviously the White House is going to be paying attention to. This is not, look, Chuck Schumer plans these things out. This is a theme. he's not going to get a whole lot of stuff from the House GOP, so he's just going to hammer this China stuff. Is that a fair way to assess where that's at?
That is absolutely a fair assessment. And of course, with these unidentified objects, what was interesting, I'm sure you saw this on Saturday. Senator John Tester said that they found another object flying over the sky in Montana, and Tester put out a thing. And it was interesting when I saw it, and I interpreted it as, oh, Chuck's giving Tester, who hasn't made a decision about running yet, a little bit of breathing room. It is allowing him to kind of look like he's doing serious work. And that's not to say that Tester is insincere, but it's allowing him to be seen as this, as keeping a monitor over this thing after another flying device came over the skies of Montana. That really stood out to me. And I was like, oh, Chuck Schumer's giving John Tester some breathing room.
Yeah, Eric Garcia joining us. While we're on the subject, look, I'm one of those cynical people.
Yes.
I'm very cynical about stuff. No, I don't believe in aliens. No, I don't believe in UFOs. Yes, I study history. I'm all for shooting down anything that encroaches on our airspace because that's a sovereignty issue. I also study history. This is not the first, last, or will be the last time our airspace has been violated by a foreign power. Let's be adults here for a second. You just mentioned it. There's a political aspect to all these unidentified things getting shot down. And my question, when something comes out like this, is not, why is it happening? My second question is, why are we hearing about it? Well, yeah. I've got a little bit of a theory that we're hearing about this because this GOP Congress came in saying they're going to cut the DOD budget. There is now wide-ranging reporting that Biden's budget proposals is going to have an increase in DOD spending. Gee, Wally Willikers, wouldn't you know that anything vaguely looking like a threat that the DOD can answer is getting a whole lot of press? Look, there's politics involved in these stories.
Yeah. I mean, now take into account with the first balloon that we knew of, not this last week, but the previous week, that wasn't spotted by the DOD. That was spotted by people in Montana. So taking it, but the fact that they shot down the device over the coast of the Carolinas, and the fact that it had, that was interesting. That the fact that Admiral Kirby, John Kirby, who's the NSC spokesman, spent basically the entirety of the press briefing last week on Friday talking about it. Despite the fact the president's going to Poland to show solidarity with Ukraine, it does show that I think that the DOD and the Pentagon is absolutely trying to make the case that we can't make the cuts because I should also add, the House members of the House GOP are talking about this, but the Senate GOP is very much no, this is unacceptable. As soon as the balloon was shot down, Mitch McConnell said that the president can't cut his defense budget. He needs to increase the defense budget. Plenty of senators like Senator Roger Wicker, who's on armed services, I think he's the ranking member on armed services, said that that cutting defense spending is a no-go. So this is going to be the White House, Senate Republicans, and some House Democrats are basically telling the really right-wing conservatives, no, this ain't happening. You're not cutting the defense budget.
Yeah, and there's a lot here. Defense is like education. It's like, well, you can't do it. Most of the budget has nothing to do with the frontline troops. That's what they're talking about cutting. So this is just kind of the old
administrative.
Yeah, there's plenty to cut in the DOD that wouldn't hurt the troops whatsoever. Okay, Eric Garcia, the debt ceiling is going to be the theme because there's nothing else going on. There's going to be a deal here of some kind. What's the pound of flesh involved here that gets this over the starting line, and does Kevin McCarthy survive it?
Okay, those are two very important questions. So first off, yes, they are going to raise the debt limit. Don Bacon, who is a moderate from Nebraska, said that they're not going to do what's called a discharge petition, which would allow for all the Democrats and some moderate Republicans to just bring a clean debt ceiling increase to the floor without going through the committees. But I think that ultimately and McCarthy has said ultimately that Social Security and Medicare are off the table. That hasn't. But what he didn't say is he didn't say Medicaid. And, my good friend Joseph Roig asked Joe Manchin about Medicaid, and he kind of showed some openness. But then when I talked to Joe Manchin, he said that we're not scaring the bejesus out of people about things that they depend on. So that might be something. There might be some cuts around the margins, but I don't think. But incidentally enough, the person who laid it out the most was AOC, which she said, look, if you don't touch Social Security and Medicare and you don't touch defense, you don't have that big a chunk of when it comes to discretionary spending and non-discretionary spending. You're going to have trouble making the kind of cuts, especially because Republicans want to balance the budget within 10 years. When you take Social Security and Medicare off the table and you take defense off the table, that is infeasible. So the question then becomes, and of course, take into account that the Democrats still control the Senate, so they're probably not going to say yes to a lot of the kind of cuts that House Republicans want anyway. So that is so really the question is, what is there left to cut? And then the question comes, will Kevin be able to get enough Republicans? Will he be able to follow the Hastert rule? And for those who don't know, the Hastert rule, named after an actual pedophile who went to prison, it means that House Republicans need to get a majority of their party to put anything on the floor. I don't know if that can actually get to the floor. So without Kevin having to ask the Democrats for hat in hand.
Yeah, and both of those will be brutal to him and his own raucous caucus that he's trying to hold on to. Okay, one last question. We are entering the presidential. Look, Biden's going to run again. We've got most of the Republicans. Nikki Haley's going to be announcing here probably next week. It looks like Trump's already in. DeSantis's people are saying his timeline somewhere around May to June. So we're in a holding pattern on this. Presidential elections affect what Congress does a lot. Lot. What is the congressional? Because that's what you cover. What are they waiting to drop in the presidential cycles? Are they trying to just get this debt limit done before that kicks into full gear and then they can just do committee stuff? How's Congress and the Senate reacting to the calendar ticking on the presidential season?
Well, I mean, I think that it was interesting. I talked with Brendan Buck, who worked for John Boehner and Paul Ryan right after the midterm election. And he said, absolutely, Trump being in the presidential cycle and being in the presidential fold is going to absolutely affect this, because if Trump posts something on Truth Social and he says, Kevin, don't take the deal, need to be strong, all caps, or we don't have a country, then that could affect a debt limit deal. Conversely, Ron DeSantis never really had a relationship with Kevin. So I think that because he was part of the Freedom Caucus and all those folks when he was a member of Congress. So it absolutely does affect it. I think that I'm sure that McCarthy is definitely thinking about the fact that if Trump doesn't like a deal that they've done on, the budget or a continuing resolution or the debt limit, that he's going to have Marjorie Taylor Greene knocking on his door sometime soon, and it's not going to be pretty.
Yeah, Eric Garcia. I'll ask you this because I did a Fox hit a couple of weeks ago, and they were asking about it. Look, he can go back on Twitter whenever he wants to, because I'm talking about Trump here, and Elon begged, borrowed, and tried to shame him into coming back already, and he hadn't yet. This True Social thing, he's supposed to wait 6 hours or whatever. It's got a regulatory problem. It may be going under before even then. The rumor is that his agreement ends with them anyway, somewhere around May or June. That's about the time presidential season really kicks off. Trump can get back on Facebook now, Meta, that includes Instagram, all this stuff. If you start getting, I'm just looking at the congressional calendar here. This is about the time all this stuff's going to really get icky and
Yes.
dicey this March through June. Look, that's going to be the make or break of this Congress is the March through June period of this year. That may be the time that the presidential season really kicks off. That might be the time Trump returns to social media properly. That's a lot of cross streams all at once for folks to deal with.
It is going to enter cross streams, and I'm sure that back in the day, Paul Ryan used to joke that he said, like, every morning I wake up and I check all of Trump's tweets that I'm going to pretend that I haven't seen this morning. And that is absolutely going to be Speaker McCarthy in the coming weeks, because he's going to have to pretend to say that, Trump's the president, but he doesn't lead the Congress. He's not the Speaker of the House. But he's kind of in a bind because, as people might have remembered, because thanks to the C-SPAN cameras, Marjorie Taylor Greene got Trump on the phone to try to whip up votes for him. So Kevin is kind of, I'm trying to think of the word. Kevin owes Trump a debt. And Trump could basically at any moment tweet out, I got Kevin the speaker, the votes for the speakership. Don't pass a debt limit increase. And then what is he going to do?
Does he survive the summer?
It could very easily. So the question of whether he survives the summer or not has always been that's the question everybody else asks. But the
because he has to pass the debt limit. Let's just play this out. He is going to pass the debt limit. That is going to happen, which breaks all his promises.
Which breaks all of his promises because he got rid of the Gephardt rule. He got rid of a lot of the other rules. The question then is, who leads the revolt? Because it's got to be someone with credibility. It can't be Matt Gaetz. It can't be Lauren Boebert. It's got to be one of the 10 or 13 Republicans who switched their votes on him. And the other question is, who do they put up in exchange instead of him? That to me is the real question. Is if the way he survives is who leads this revolt against him, and do they have a credible alternative? Because Scalise is not going to knife him yet. Jim Banks is leaving for the Senate. Stefanik, but
well, as we've talked to before, I've said it since she did it. Stefanik did not burn all her bridges to sit at the number 3 spot. So Scalise better do it or get off the pot, because he might get double knifed because he's got her standing behind him. I'm just throwing a name out there. Like she didn't look. She's an Ivy League. She was she didn't burn all those bridges to be the number 3 in the House. No. She's ambitious. That's somebody I would watch. Scalise may do it himself. Banks is off to the Senate supposedly, and that's going to get ugly. But I would think it would be one of those two, right?
It would be one of those two. I don't. Emmer, I think, is waiting to actually move up in the ranks after he had an admittedly good 2 terms as NRCC chairman. But the real question, as you said, is Stefanik or Scalise. The question is, again, Kevin might survive if the thing Kevin McCarthy has going for him is that his enemies are probably just as incapable of getting the votes as he is the best way I could put it.
What a time to be alive and to cover Congress, my friend. You, my friend, have good job security, because this is going to be one of the crazier 2-year periods in the history of the United States Congress. Eric Garcia, we always appreciate it. Let folks know where they can find and follow you. Promote the book. We didn't touch on it today, but you did an article a little while back on autism and the electroshock treatment that was just shocking. Make sure you mention that real quick for folks, where they can find your book, now out in paperback, and how they can follow you until we get you back on Hertel again.
Yeah, right here, We're Not Broke, and change the autism conversation, available wherever you can get your books. You can get it on Amazon. You can get it at your local bookshop, online, IndieBound, whatever. You can also follow me on Twitter at Eric M. Garcia. I wrote an article for the Boston Globe about the fact that Congress finally passed legislation to allow for the end of electroshock therapy on autistic students. If that makes you go WTF, me too. So thank you very much. I always love being on the show.
Yeah, you do great work. We'll talk to you soon. Keep your head down up there, brother. You keep them straight.
All right. See you soon.
See you, Eric.